I still remember the sound, that sharp slap of paper against my front door. A notice, red ink, bold letters screaming violation. They said my workshop violated community aesthetic standards. They said my fence was too tall, my tools were unsightly, and my property was a disturbance. But here's the thing. My workshop wasn't just a hobby space. It was my business, my lifeline. The place I built after years of saving every dime. And now, because some clipboard warriors didn't like the look of it, they wanted to tear it down. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. So I went to the HOA meeting that night, ready to talk it out. Big mistake. The room was packed with smug faces and crossed arms. Karen Mitchell, the HOA president, sat at the head of the table like a judge in a courtroom. She built herself. She didn't even let me finish my sentence. Her voice was cold, rehearsed. Sir, the community has voted. You have 7 days to comply. 7 days. To destroy everything I'd built. That's when something snapped in me. Because when you take everything a man worked for, his sweat, his pride, his purpose, you don't just push him. You create a storm. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my shop, surrounded by half-finished projects and the smell of oil and wood dust. Every sound and the ticking clock, the crickets outside, the distant hum of streetlights, felt like a countdown. They wanted to crush me under their rules. But instead, they woke something up. By morning, I had a plan. If the HOA wanted a war over aesthetics, they were about to learn how ugly I could make things. The first move was small, subtle. A simple post on the neighborhood board, exposing how HOA funds were mysteriously reallocated for beautification projects. By noon, half the neighborhood was whispering. By night, I knew I'd hit a nerve. And as I looked out my window at that perfect suburban street, white fences, manicured lawns, spotless driveways, I smiled for the first time in days, because I knew this wasn't going to be a battle. It was going to be a demolition. By sunrise, the whispers had turned into questions. By noon, questions became accusations. The HOA board wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone like me. I watched from my porch as Karen's silver SUV rolled up and parked, with that same self-righteous precision she used on everything. She got out, clutching her clipboard like it was a badge of power. Behind her were two of her loyal enforcers, Tom and Linda. The kind of people who measure grass with rulers and write anonymous complaints about trash bins being visible. Karen stormed up to my driveway. "You posted lies on the board," she snapped. "Not lies," I said. "Just screenshots from your own budget reports." Her face went pale. For a split second, she looked like she'd been caught. Then her expression hardened. "This is defamation. The HOA will take action." I leaned closer. "You already did, Karen. You started it when you taped that violation notice to my door." She turned on her heel and marched off. But I saw the crack, the first fracture in her perfect armor. By evening, the HOA group chat, the one they thought was private, was in meltdown. Someone had leaked messages between Karen and a landscaping contractor. Turns out those beautification funds paid for her personal garden renovation. Within hours, half the board wanted a meeting. The other half wanted Karen gone. I didn't even have to lift a finger. But I wasn't done. You see, when people like her try to control everything, they rely on one thing, fear. Take that away, and their empire crumbles. So I went door to door, meeting the neighbors they'd silenced for years. People who'd been fined for things like the wrong shade of mailbox, or excessive Halloween decorations. I listened, took notes, collected stories. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, I had a stack of testimonies an inch thick. The meeting room was packed again, but this time they weren't on her side. Karen tried to maintain her composure, banging her gavel for order. But the noise, the shouting, the outrage, drowned her out. And right there, in that chaos, I saw something I'd never forget. The fear in her eyes when she realized the neighborhood wasn't afraid anymore. The first battle was over. But I knew the war had just begun. Because people like Karen, they don't surrender. They strike back. The silence didn't last long. When the HOA's power cracks, they don't fix it. They double down. And that's exactly what Karen did. 2 days after the chaotic meeting, I woke up to the sound of engines. 3 trucks, county inspection vehicles, parked outside my property. Karen stood there with her arms crossed, sunglasses on, pretending she wasn't behind it. But I knew. You could feel her satisfaction from 20 feet away. "Morning," I said, walking out. The lead inspector didn't even look at me. "Anonymous complaint," he muttered. "Alleged unlicensed structure, possible zoning violations." Anonymous? Yeah, right. They inspected everything. My workshop, my shed, even my backyard. Taking pictures, writing notes, and when they left, one of them handed me a bright orange notice. Stop work order. It was official now. My shop, my business, was shut down until further review. Karen stood across the street, sipping her coffee, smiling. That smirk. It lit a fire I didn't know I still had. I could have fought it legally, but court takes time. And that's what she wanted. She wanted me broke. She wanted me gone. So instead, I went for something faster, smarter. That night, I set up cameras. Motion-triggered, silent, hidden. I'd learned from a neighbor that HOA patrols sometimes trespassed after dark to document violations. And I had a hunch they'd come back. I didn't have to wait long. 2 nights later, around 1 a.m., I caught movement on my phone. Grainy footage, infrared lighting, and there they were. Tom and Linda. Flashlights, cameras, on my property. They took pictures, measured my fence, even peeked into my workshop window. I just sat in the dark, recording everything. The next morning, I didn't call the HOA. I called the county sheriff. By noon, the footage was in official hands. By evening, Tom and Linda were being questioned for criminal trespassing. Karen tried to do damage control, of course. Emails flew. Statements were made. Excuses rehearsed. But the truth was out. And when the sheriff's cruiser parked outside her house that night, I stood on my porch and watched her curtains twitch. She tried to crush me with rules and regulations. Now her own rules were burying her alive. But the real twist? I wasn't done yet. This was just round 1. The next move would shake her entire board. And it wouldn't be on paper. By the time the sun came up, the neighborhood was buzzing. Everyone had seen the sheriff's car. Everyone knew something was wrong inside the perfect little HOA kingdom. And that was exactly what I wanted. Karen tried to spin the story. Of course, miscommunication, routine checkup, no wrongdoing. But gossip spreads faster than truth, and I made sure of it. I started small, a post on the community page. If the HOA can enter your property without permission, what stops them from entering your home? It hit like gasoline on dry leaves. Hundreds of comments. Dozens of angry residents suddenly remembering their own random inspections. Within hours, the board's reputation was on fire. But I wasn't satisfied. Not yet. Because people like Karen thrive on control, and the only way to destroy them is to make them lose it. That's when Operation Exposure began. I started digging. Old board emails, budget discrepancies, invoices with strange company names. And then, jackpot. A local landscaping company, Greenscape Solutions, had received almost $30,000 from HOA funds for community upgrades. Except the upgrades never happened. You know what did? A brand new stone patio behind Karen's house. Same design, same contractor. I packaged everything, photos, receipts, public records, into one clean document. No accusations, just facts. Then I sent it to every homeowner in the subdivision. No names, no signature. Just the title, "Where did your HOA money go?" The explosion was instant. Phones rang non-stop. Karen's email crashed. Neighbors gathered on driveways, waving printouts and yelling her name. By evening, she called an emergency meeting. The boardroom was chaos. Cameras flashing, people recording, voices rising. Karen tried to shout above it all. "This is misinformation!" But one neighbor stood up and held up a photo of Karen's patio. "You used our money!" She froze. That silence, that second where every pair of eyes turned on her, was worth every sleepless night. And just when she thought it couldn't get worse, I walked in. Late, calm, confident. "Karen," I said, "you wanted transparency, so here it is." I placed the documents on the table. The crowd roared. Her face turned red, her hands shook, but she couldn't say a word. Because deep down she knew. I'd just pulled the mask off the queen of the HOA, and for the first time, she looked scared. The night of the emergency meeting felt like the climax of a courtroom. Drama, except this was real. And every eye in that room burned with anger. Karen sat at the head of the table, clutching her gavel like a lifeline. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by that twitch in her jaw she couldn't hide. The crowd wasn't quiet anymore. They shouted, demanded answers. The same people who once feared her now wanted her gone. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than anything I could have shouted. Neighbors slammed down photos of her new patio, invoices with HOA funds listed, and statements from contractors who'd been redirected to her private property. Karen tried to deny it. It was approved maintenance, but someone cut her off. "Maintenance doesn't come with a hot tub, Karen." The room erupted. She banged her gavel, yelling for order. But the sound was drowned by boos and laughter. You could feel her authority crumbling, piece by piece. Finally, one of the board members, Greg, the treasurer, stood up. He'd always been quiet, loyal, obedient. But that night, even he'd had enough. "I'm not taking the fall for this," he said, voice shaking. "She authorized every payment. Check the records." The room froze. Everyone turned to Karen. Her eyes went wide. "Greg, don't—" Too late. He dropped a folder of documents right in front of her. Everything. Signatures, approvals, timestamps. That was the moment her reign ended. Someone motioned to vote for her removal. It passed, unanimously. The queen of the HOA was dethroned in front of everyone she once ruled. I stood there, arms crossed, watching her world collapse. No yelling, no victory speech, just quiet satisfaction. When it was over, she stormed past me, whispering through gritted teeth, "You think this is over? You don't know what I can do." I smiled. "Oh, I think I do." Outside, the air was cold and calm. The neighborhood lights glowed softly, and for the first time in months, it felt peaceful. But I knew peace wouldn't last. People like Karen don't go quietly. They regroup, they plot, and sure enough, 2 days later, I got a certified letter in the mail, not from the HOA, but from Karen's attorney. Defamation, damages, retaliation. She was going for blood. Only this time she had no board to hide behind. This wasn't going to be politics anymore. This was personal. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. My name printed in bold, stamped urgent. I didn't even have to open it to know. This was Karen's next move. Inside, a cease and desist letter and a lawsuit notice. Defamation of character. Emotional distress. Damages totaling $75,000. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. Karen had lost control of the HOA, but she wasn't done fighting. She was like a cornered animal now, and cornered animals bite. Still, I wasn't reckless. I called my lawyer, explained everything, sent him all the files, emails, and photos. He read through them quietly, then looked up and said, "She's bluffing. You've got her cold, but if she goes through with this, things are going to get ugly." Ugly? They were already way past that. The next few weeks were chaos. Karen started showing up at community events again, pretending nothing happened, smiling that fake smile, telling anyone who'd listen that I was harassing her. She even got a few loyalists to spread her new narrative, that I'd doctored evidence and hacked HOA emails. It worked on some people. Fear always does. Then came the local paper article. Front page. HOA president claims cyber harassment by former resident. She'd fed them the story, twisted every fact, painted herself as the victim. I stared at the headline for a long time. She was trying to erase the truth and rewrite the story where I was the villain. That's when I realized something. Up to now, I'd been reacting, playing defense, letting her dictate the fight. Not anymore. I built a website, simple, factual, and brutally transparent. Every receipt, every email, every photo uploaded for the world to see. No opinions, no anger, just evidence. And at the top, one bold headline: the truth about the HOA. Within hours, it spread. Neighbors shared it. Friends shared it. Local bloggers picked it up. By the end of the week, her attorney dropped the case, quietly. You can't sue someone for telling the truth when the truth is public record. Karen disappeared for a few days after that. Her SUV didn't move. Curtains closed. Lights off. But I knew it wasn't over. Because people like her don't vanish. They regroup. And when she came back, she wasn't alone. The neighborhood felt different that week. Quieter. Like the air itself was waiting for something to happen. Karen's house sat in silence, curtains drawn, driveway empty. But beneath that calm, I could feel the storm brewing again. It started on a Thursday morning. 3 unfamiliar cars rolled into the neighborhood. Polished black sedans, tinted windows. They parked right in front of Karen's house. By noon, she was outside again, standing tall, shaking hands with strangers in suits. And then I saw the logo on one of the cars, Central Property Management, a corporate HOA oversight firm, the kind that takes over local boards when things get out of hand. Karen had called in reinforcements. By that evening, every mailbox in the community had a new letter inside. Effective immediately, the HOA will be managed by Central Property Management. All residents must comply with new enforcement policies. It was her masterstroke. She couldn't run the HOA anymore, so she sold it off to someone bigger, meaner, and untouchable. And they wasted no time showing who was in charge. New fines, new patrols. Unmarked trucks cruising through the streets at night with high-beam flashlights. A $250 citation appeared in my mailbox for improper exterior storage, even though my tools were locked up inside my garage. Karen was back to smiling again. Not from victory, but from vengeance. She'd found a new army to fight her war. But what she didn't know was I'd already started building my own. See, I wasn't the only one they were targeting. Half the neighborhood got hit with bogus fines, flower beds, fences, even non-conforming mailboxes. So I started talking. Quietly, calmly, one neighbor at a time. By the end of the week, we had 15 households on our side. People who'd had enough. We met in garages, backyards, coffee shops, anywhere out of sight from Karen's new corporate allies. We called ourselves the Freehold Group. It wasn't official, but it had purpose, to take back our neighborhood. We gathered evidence, recorded every patrol truck, documented every false citation, every photo, every document, archived and backed up. Because if Karen wanted to bring in corporate muscle, we were going to bring something stronger. Public exposure, community unity, and legal firepower. And as I watched her from my porch that night, standing smugly beside her new partners, I realized something. She thought she'd turned the page, but I was writing the next chapter, and this one was going to explode. We met in my workshop that night, the same one Karen had once tried to shut down. Now it had become a war room. 15 people, tired and angry, gathered around my old workbench. Blueprints of the neighborhood spread out like a battlefield map. Coffee cups, notebooks, phones recording every word. This isn't about one man versus an HOA anymore, I told them. This is about all of us, about taking back what's ours. For the first time in months, I saw something new in their faces. Not fear. Fire. We started simple, documenting everything. Every fine, every letter, every inspection from Karen's new corporate overlords. One neighbor, Maria, brought a binder so thick it could have stopped a bullet. Years of bogus citations and harassment. Another, Dave, was a retired cop. He offered to help us legally, to make sure every bit of evidence was airtight. And so began the Freehold Rebellion. Within 2 weeks, we had built a full database of violations. Not by residents, but by the HOA itself. Illegal fines, privacy breaches, unlawful surveillance. But the real spark came from something none of us expected. Maria's teenage son was studying computer science. He dug through publicly available county records and found that Central Property Management wasn't just managing us. They were buying into the neighborhood. 3 houses, all foreclosed by non-compliance fines. They weren't enforcing rules. They were stealing property. That's when we knew this wasn't just a local fight. This was corruption, top to bottom. We planned our counterstrike. Step 1, create awareness. Step 2, hit the county with a legal petition. Step 3, expose the entire operation online. We filmed interviews with homeowners. We documented evidence like an investigative news team. Then we built a digital dossier, every file. Time-stamped, verified, and ready to release. The final touch was a new name for the movement. Free the Neighborhood. We launched it quietly one Friday night. By Saturday morning, it had gone viral in our county. Local radio stations picked it up. Bloggers wrote about it. Reporters called. And when Central Property Management tried to issue a public statement, it backfired. Because their own records, now public, showed clear signs of asset manipulation. The rebellion wasn't a whisper anymore, it was a roar. And that night, as fireworks from someone's backyard painted the sky red, white and gold, I realized something. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was revolution. It started with a single headline. Local HOA accused of property seizure scheme. The article was short, just a few paragraphs on a small-town news site. But it spread like wildfire. Within hours, bigger outlets picked it up. And by the next morning, our once silent suburb was surrounded by news vans. Reporters were knocking on doors, microphones flashing, cameras rolling. Karen's precious, perfect neighborhood had become the epicenter of a county-wide scandal. I'll never forget the look on her face that morning. She stood on her front lawn in a tailored blazer, pretending to welcome the press, but her smile twitched every time a reporter asked about embezzled funds and illegal foreclosures. Every question hit her like a hammer. And the best part? I didn't have to say a word. The truth was already speaking for me. But the media attention didn't come without heat. By that evening, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Anonymous calls, blocked numbers, threats. Someone spray-painted liar across my fence. Another night, a brick showed up through my window with a note. Stop before it gets worse. I didn't stop. I replaced the window, left the brick on the porch, and installed more cameras. Because fear is exactly what they wanted, and I wasn't giving it to them. 2 days later, the story broke bigger. A local TV crew aired a full segment on Central Property Management. They interviewed homeowners from other neighborhoods. Same pattern. Same fines, same foreclosures. The corporation wasn't managing communities. They were harvesting them. Karen tried to deny everything. But the evidence trail led straight through her old emails and signatures. The patio project, the contracts, the early deals with Central, all of it. And when a reporter asked, "Were you compensated for referring Central Property Management?" she froze. You could see the truth flicker behind her eyes before she turned and walked away from the camera. That clip went viral overnight. Neighbors who once ignored me now showed up offering help. Old enemies became allies. Even some HOA board members started leaking more documents. Desperate to save themselves. The narrative had flipped. Karen wasn't the enforcer anymore. She was the face of corruption. But as the media storm raged outside, I could feel something else brewing, something darker. Because when powerful people lose control, they stop playing fair. The night it happened, The air felt heavy, too still, too quiet. You learn to notice things like that when you've been fighting a war in your own neighborhood. It was around 2:47 a.m. when the motion alert pinged my phone. One camera, rear side of the workshop, then another. Movement. I switched to the live feed. 2 figures, dark hoodies, flashlights. One of them carried a crowbar. I didn't panic, I hit record. Every step, every angle, every second caught in crystal clear night vision. Then I called the sheriff. The dispatcher recognized my name before I finished explaining. "You again?" She sighed. "Yeah," I said, "but this time it's not the HOA. It's breaking and entering." Sirens came fast, but the intruders were faster. By the time deputies arrived, the back door of my workshop was splintered. Inside, chaos. Tools scattered, drawers overturned, files missing. But what really made my stomach drop was what wasn't missing. The computer tower that held all the evidence. They hadn't taken it, they'd smashed it. It wasn't theft. It was sabotage. The deputies took statements, bagged the crowbar, asked questions, but deep down I already knew who sent them. The next morning, I posted the camera footage online. Blurred faces, timestamp clear. Caption: "When truth threatens power, power sends shadows." The video hit 50,000 views in 12 hours. And suddenly my fight wasn't just local anymore. People across the state, homeowners, ex-HOA victims, even legal advocates, started sharing my posts, sending messages, offering help. But Karen, she stayed silent. Too silent. No comments, no posts, not even a sighting. Until 3 nights later, when I woke up to headlights sweeping across my yard. Her silver SUV parked at the edge of my driveway. She didn't get out. She just sat there, engine idling, lights on. We stared at each other through the dark. Glass. 2 people who'd gone way. Past neighborhood politics. Then she rolled down her window, leaned out, and said just loud enough for me to hear, "You're destroying yourself." And then she drove off. But the truth was, I wasn't the one unraveling. She was, because no matter what she tried to destroy, every move she made only added fuel to my fire. And that night, as I looked at the shattered glass in my workshop, I swore something to myself. This war wouldn't end in court. It would end in exposure. Total, public, irreversible. It didn't take long for the media storm and the break-in to draw official eyes. 3 days later, I got a certified letter from the County Housing Commission. They were opening a public investigation into central property management, and they wanted testimony. Mine would be first. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning at the county courthouse. I showed up early, clean shirt, every document neatly stacked. Evidence drives in duplicate. Outside, reporters lined the steps. Flashes popped. Questions flew. Inside, the room was packed. Residents, lawyers, even a few state inspectors. And at the far end of the aisle, there she was, Karen Mitchell. Hair perfect, expression carved from ice, flanked by 2 corporate attorneys. She didn't look at me as I walked past, but I saw her fingers tapping against the folder in front of her. Fast, nervous. When they called my name, I stood. Every word I spoke came straight from months of chaos. Every file a piece of her empire's rot. Emails showing misuse of HOA funds, records of illegal property seizures, photos of her private renovations funded by community beautification, and finally, the security footage of the break-in. The room was silent except for the sound of papers shuffling. One commissioner looked up and said quietly, "Mr. Cole, are you saying this entire operation was designed to drive homeowners into foreclosure? For corporate acquisition?" "Yes," I said, "and it worked. Until now." Karen's lawyer objected, but it was useless. The evidence was a tidal wave. When they played the footage of her signing the referral contract with Central, you could see the last bit of color drain from her face. The questioning went on for hours. By the time they dismissed me, the hall outside buzzed like a hornet nest. Reporters swarmed. Cameras clicked. But through the noise, I caught Karen's voice behind me. Low, sharp, furious. "You don't understand what you've done." I turned, met her glare, and said, "Oh, I think I do. You built your power on silence. And now everyone's listening." That night, the county issued a press release. Preliminary findings indicate potential fraud, misappropriation of community funds, and criminal negligence. Karen's name was mentioned. So was Central Property Management. For the first time, it wasn't just rumor. It was official. But I knew this wouldn't make her back down. When someone like Karen starts losing control, they don't retreat. They go nuclear. When people lose power, they panic. When Karen lost power, she detonated. The day after the county hearing, I woke up to chaos. My email inbox flooded. Hundreds of messages, all from unknown senders, all the same subject line. "Cease activity immediately." It wasn't spam. It was a coordinated strike. Someone had leaked my personal information, phone number, email, even my address. onto a homeowner's gossip forum that Karen once ran. Trolls, threats, fake complaints to my employer, even a false police report claiming I'd threatened an HOA official. The goal was clear: bury me under noise and fear. By noon, 2 officers showed up at my door, calm but serious. "We got a report of harassment, Mr. Cole. Mind if we talk?" I showed them everything. The evidence, the footage, the hearing notice. One officer sighed and said, "You're being targeted. Keep your cameras rolling." They left shaking their heads. But I could see it in their eyes. They knew I was right. That night, I checked the neighborhood board. Karen was back online, her tone venom disguised as virtue. "Certain residents have brought unnecessary negative attention to our community," she wrote. "The media circus has hurt property values. True homeowners should unite against this defamation." She was rallying the loyalists, the same handful who'd stood by her from the start. And now, fueled by her paranoia, they were more dangerous than ever. One of them, Tom, the export enforcer, started following me. Everywhere. His car appeared behind mine on the way to the store, parked down the street from my house, even idling outside late at night. I started keeping a log. Dates, times, license plates. Evidence. Always evidence. But Karen didn't stop at intimidation. 3 days later, a city inspector arrived unannounced with a new complaint. Possible environmental violations. They claimed someone reported chemical dumping behind my workshop. I led him out back. Clean soil. Empty barrels. Nothing. He looked around, shrugged, and said, "Somebody's clearly setting you up." That night, I sat in my workshop, lights off, security feed glowing across my monitors, and realized something critical. Karen wasn't fighting to win anymore. She was fighting to destroy me, even if she went down with me. And if she wanted all-out war, she was finally going to get it. If Karen wanted war, I was done playing defense. I spent that weekend turning my workshop into a command center. Extra cameras, backups on encrypted drives, every file, every email stored in triplicate. And then I started digging again. This time, not just into Karen's history, but into Central Property Management's entire operation. Their website looked clean and corporate, but when I traced their registered business addresses, 3 of them were P.O. boxes. No actual offices, no employees listed publicly, just shell companies, layers deep. The deeper I went, the uglier it got. Hidden subsidiaries, overlapping LLCs, fake contractors. They weren't just managing neighborhoods, they were laundering money through them. I couldn't expose this alone. So I called in backup. A local investigative journalist named Riley Chen. She'd already covered our HOA story once. Now she wanted more. I gave her everything: files, screenshots, testimony. She spent 3 days verifying every detail before she said the words. I'd been waiting to hear. "Ethan, this isn't local corruption. It's organized theft." That's when the counterstrike began. We drafted a joint report, a full expose connecting Karen's referral deal to Central's illegal property acquisitions. Every dollar trail, every signature. And we didn't publish it quietly. We timed the release to hit Monday morning, same day the county commission planned to meet again about the investigation. By 8 a.m., the story was live. Inside the HOA, scheme, how a corporate giant and a local president turned home ownership into profit. It went everywhere. Online news, morning radio, social media. And this time, national outlets picked it up. Karen's name was front and center again. Her photo beside the headline. Her backyard patio gleaming behind her in a satellite image. I stood outside that morning watching delivery trucks toss newspapers onto driveways. Neighbors walked out, picked them up, froze and stared. The quiet suburban streets that once hid her power now echoed with whispers. "She's finished." By noon, I got word from Riley. The state attorney's office had opened a formal case. Fraud, misappropriation, racketeering. Karen had crossed a line she couldn't walk back from. And when the news crews returned to our neighborhood for live coverage, I saw her curtain pull back again, just a sliver, enough to catch her shadow trembling behind the glass. She wasn't a queen anymore. She was a fugitive trapped inside her own castle. But I still wasn't done, because there was one last card she hadn't played, and I knew it was coming. Cornered animals do unpredictable things. And Karen Mitchell? She wasn't the type to surrender. She was the type to burn the cage down. 2 days after the expose dropped, I came home to find a county vehicle parked outside my gate. A code enforcement officer stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Cole," he said, "we received a report that you've made unpermitted structural changes to your property. We'll need to inspect the premises." I almost laughed. It was desperate, transparent. Karen had filed a final barrage of complaints: zoning, safety, noise, even illegal livestock operations. She was trying to bury me in red tape before the legal walls caved in on her. I let the officer walk through the barn, the workshop, the shed. He found nothing. Of course. But when he left, I noticed something he hadn't. A small black box tucked under my fence line. I knelt down. It was a cheap tracking device, crudely wired, blinking faintly red. That's when I realized this wasn't just harassment anymore. Karen had someone physically watching me. That night, I reviewed my security feeds again. 2:14 a.m., a dark SUV creeping past the gate. 2:17, someone on foot, flashlight flickering near the workshop. And then, for a split second, a face caught in the glare. Tom, her enforcer. He wasn't sneaky enough. I had him on tape. By sunrise, I'd called the sheriff's department, the same deputy who'd helped me months ago. When I showed him the footage, he didn't hesitate. "We'll handle it," he said. "Looks like someone's crossed into criminal territory now." Later that day, unmarked cars rolled quietly into the neighborhood. By evening, Tom was in handcuffs, caught with a bag of false documents and HOA letterheads. When the deputies questioned him, he cracked within an hour. He admitted Karen had told him to monitor me, to gather leverage. But the real bombshell? She'd offered him a cut of Central's, kickback money if he kept me under pressure, until the case settled. That confession made everything official. The sheriff's office filed a criminal intimidation charge, and once the warrant went public, Karen's world imploded. Her lawyer resigned, her board quit, and the same neighbors who once feared her began taking down her HOA regulation signs from their yards. But deep down, I knew she wouldn't run. She still had one last desperate move left. Something reckless, something personal. And when she made it, it would either end her or me. By midweek, the neighborhood had changed. No more whispers. No more quiet fear. The power Karen once wielded had evaporated like smoke in the wind. But she wasn't finished. Late Thursday night, a fire truck siren screamed down the street. I grabbed my phone and ran outside. Smoke curled from the far edge of the community park. Flames, licking a small storage shed that belonged to the HOA. Nothing major, yet. But the symbolism was clear. Karen had orchestrated a scare tactic, a warning fire. Her signature, chaos without confrontation. The sheriff arrived within minutes, and I joined him on the perimeter. Neighbors poured out in pajamas and nightgowns, faces pale, phones recording every angle. The fire wasn't big enough to harm anyone, but it was big enough to send a message. By dawn, the news was everywhere. HOA property targeted in suspicious fire. Residents on edge. Karen, of course, denied everything in a statement to reporters. "Any suggestion of my involvement is unfounded and malicious. I am committed to community safety." But the irony? Everyone in the neighborhood knew she had motive. And thanks to my digital dossier and the media coverage, everyone also knew she had no alibi. By the next day, I received an anonymous tip. Someone close to Karen had grown tired of her schemes. They sent me photos, a matchbook from a local diner, fingerprints that partially matched HOA files, a receipt for lighter fluid in her handwriting. I sent everything to the sheriff. Within 24 hours, Karen was under investigation for arson and intimidation. The atmosphere shifted overnight. The neighbors, once terrified, began laughing at the absurdity. Even the corporate muscle from Central Property Management started backing off, seeing the risk now. For the first time, I felt a deep, visceral relief, not because Karen was exposed, but because the fear she fed off had finally reversed. I stood on my porch that night, watching the sky turn gold. Every flicker of smoke from the fire was a reminder. Chaos can be contagious, and the one who started it doesn't always control it. Karen had ignited the neighborhood, literally and figuratively. But in the end, it was her own fire that would consume her. And as I looked at my community, my neighbors laughing and talking freely again, I realized we weren't just survivors. We were victors. But this was far from over, because Karen's desperation had only just begun, and her final moves would test the limits of everything I'd built. Karen's desperation escalated quickly. With the media coverage piling up and criminal investigations looming, she realized she couldn't intimidate me with fire or fake citations anymore. So she went back to what she thought she knew best: the law. A thick envelope arrived at my door one Tuesday morning. Inside, a new lawsuit: defamation, trespassing, harassment, the usual litany, this time with a twist. She claimed I had illegally recorded conversations with her and her associates. I took a deep breath. For a moment, the weight of it hit me, but only for a second. Because I'd anticipated this, I called Riley, my journalist ally, and my lawyer. We went over every file, every recording, every motion-triggered camera clip. Not one of our actions violated the law. We had it all covered. And then I realized something. Karen had just walked right into a trap of her own making. The county investigation had been gathering evidence against her and Central Property Management for months. Every fraudulent invoice, every illegal fine, every documented harassment attempt, already on record. When her attorney filed this latest lawsuit, They didn't account for how airtight my case was. Every claim she made, defamation, harassment, trespassing, could be turned against her in court. We filed a motion to dismiss. Not just that, but we countersued. Criminal intimidation, fraud, misrepresentation, illegal property manipulation. And then we did something bold. We made the counterclaim public. The next morning, local news ran the headline: HOA president sued by homeowner after attempted retaliation. Karen's expression in the photo, captured at the courthouse, was priceless. Shock, fear, anger. For the first time, the predator was becoming the prey. Neighbors came out in force. They had been documenting their own interactions with her. Fines, citations, threats, all ready to support the counterclaim. Even the media frenzy that had once scared her now turned against her, amplifying the story of her pattern of intimidation. By week's end, her attorney quietly withdrew the original lawsuit. It was a tactical retreat. Karen had underestimated me and the entire neighborhood, but I knew better than to think this was truly over. Cornered people like her don't quit quietly. They strike back in ways you least expect. And if she tried one more move, I had to be ready. The tension in the neighborhood was palpable, even with the legal battle swinging in my favor. I knew Karen's obsession wouldn't allow her to walk away quietly. She had one card left, and I could feel it coming. It was a Saturday afternoon when I got the first hint. My neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, knocked frantically on my door. "Ethan, she's in the park. Talking to the media again? She's claiming you're sabotaging the community water lines." I grabbed my camera, my phone, everything I had and drove over. Sure enough, Karen had gathered a small crowd, waving documents in the air, her voice dripping with faux indignation. "He's tampering with the neighborhood. He wants to destroy everything we built." The local news crew had arrived, cameras rolling. But this time, I was ready. Every file, every photo, every documented action from months of harassment was at my fingertips. I stepped forward, calm, collected. "Karen," I said, voice amplified, "you're accusing me of crimes I haven't committed, but the truth is already public." I handed copies of inspection reports, county letters, and the criminal complaints against her to the reporters. Her smugness faltered. Her lips quivered. The crowd started whispering. Then I turned to the neighbors. "Look around. This neighborhood thrives because of all of us. Not one person trying to control everything through fear and lies. Karen, your reign is over." Her expression darkened. "You think this ends with exposure and lawsuits? I will ruin you!" she shouted. And that's when it happened. I had anticipated her desperation. One of my neighbors, a retired firefighter, stepped forward with the county inspector and documented a real-time hazard she had claimed existed and proved it was non-existent. The reporters snapped photos, capturing Karen in the act of baseless accusation. Karen's allies shrank back, realizing this confrontation was lost before it began. Her body language screamed defeat. She tried to rally, but no one listened. Finally, I looked her in the eye and said, "This is your last chance. Leave the neighborhood. Walk away quietly, or face every legal, public, and personal consequence you've created." She glared for a moment longer, a storm contained in a single glare. Then she turned and walked away, her silver SUV waiting at the curb. The crowd exhaled. Neighbors cheered. The local press recorded it all. For the first time in months, the neighborhood felt free. No HOA tyrant, no corporate enforcers, no secret threats, just people reclaiming their streets. I stood there, exhausted but victorious. Karen Mitchell had tried to crush me, but in the end, I had become her worst nightmare. With Karen finally gone, the neighborhood could breathe again. But freedom isn't just about kicking out a tyrant. It's about rebuilding what was broken. The first step was trust. Neighbors who once avoided one another out of fear started opening their doors, shaking hands, sharing stories. We organized a meeting in the local community center, not under the guise of HOA, authority, but for the people. I stood at the front of the room, a projector displaying evidence of what had happened. Not to shame anyone, but to make sure the past wouldn't repeat itself. "Look at what fear can do," I said. "Now we take back control, together." Every homeowner shared grievances, suggestions, and ideas. We discussed community rules, transparency, and accountability. No secret meetings, no shady fines, no anonymous complaints. We voted on everything openly. I spearheaded a community watch program, volunteers taking shifts, monitoring the streets, documenting any suspicious activity, ensuring safety and accountability. Not for punishment, for protection. And then came the fun part, restoring the neighborhood itself. Several properties had been neglected under Karen's rule. Lawns overgrown, fences falling, common areas ignored. We organized cleanup crews, planted gardens, repainted fences, and even built a small playground where children could finally play without fear. The transformation was incredible. Neighborhoods once divided were now united. People laughed together, barbecues returned. And for the first time in years, no one looked over their shoulder wondering if Karen was watching. I also took steps to protect my property and my workshop. Additional security cameras, legal notices posted publicly, and neighbors trained to report anything suspicious immediately. The battle had taught us one thing: prevention is just as powerful as retaliation. By the end of the month, the entire community had transformed, physically and socially. Karen's shadow still lingered in stories and whispers, but it no longer held power. I stood on my porch one evening, looking at the streets alive with families and neighbors enjoying a peaceful evening. It was quiet, yes, but not oppressive. It was alive. And I realized the victory wasn't just personal. It wasn't just about me becoming her worst nightmare. It was about reclaiming a neighborhood for the people, for justice, and for every person who had once been silenced. For the first time in years, I smiled without worry. The fight was far from easy, but it was over. And this time, we had won together. Just when we thought the battle was over, Karen made her final, desperate move. It started with subtle threats, emails, anonymous calls, letters slipped under doors. At first, we ignored them. We had her on record. We had the county investigating, and the neighborhood was united. But Karen doesn't give up easily. She escalates. 2 weeks later, she showed up at a community meeting, this time personally. Her presence alone silenced the room. Even the most outspoken neighbors hesitated, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. She carried a thick folder and wore that same smug expression. "I'm not leaving quietly," she announced. "This neighborhood belongs to me. All of you are under my oversight until further notice." A collective gasp rippled through the room. But I didn't flinch. I stepped forward, calm and deliberate, holding the folder of evidence we had compiled over months, her emails, contracts, illegal fines, and county notices. "Karen," I said, projecting my voice to every corner of the room, "you've had months to intimidate, threaten, and manipulate. Every move you made has been documented, every scheme exposed." Her face twisted in anger. "You think this ends with paperwork and cameras?" she shouted. "I can still destroy you. Your business, your reputation, everything you've built." I held up the files. "Look again. Every threat you've made is on record. Every attempt at sabotage documented. You're out of options." Then I signaled the county officials and law enforcement present. They stepped forward, formally informing her that the criminal investigation into harassment, arson, and intimidation had reached a critical stage. Her last lines of defense, manipulation and fear, crumbled in seconds. Some neighbors started recording. Others quietly whispered about the fines, the harassment, the lies. Karen realized in that moment that no one feared her anymore. She tried to storm out. Her attorneys attempted to intervene, but the county officers escorted her to the courthouse steps. By the end of the evening, Karen Mitchell had lost every shred of control she had once wielded. Her legacy of fear and intimidation erased. We all watched as she drove away, the folder of lies and threats left behind, her SUV disappearing down the street. For the first time in years, the neighborhood was free from her shadow. I turned to the neighbors, everyone exhausted but relieved, and said, "This was never just my fight. It was ours, and together we won." The room erupted in applause, laughter, and tears. The tyrant had been dethroned, finally. And as I walked out into the crisp evening air, I knew something important. Karen had tried to crush me. She had tried to silence a community, but in the end, we had become her worst nightmare. The sun rose over the neighborhood, golden and warm, like a promise of something better. After months of chaos, threats, legal battles, and sleepless nights, it finally felt peaceful. Not the quiet that comes from fear, but the kind that comes from freedom earned. The HOA was gone. Karen Mitchell's reign of terror was over. Central Property Management had pulled out, their reputation shredded by the expose and county investigation. The neighborhood, once silenced by intimidation, had found its voice. We gathered that morning for a community brunch, a simple celebration, but meaningful. Laughter filled yards, children ran freely, neighbors hugged and shared stories of months spent under Karen's shadow. It wasn't just a party, it was a healing ritual. I walked among them, smiling, shaking hands, feeling the weight of everything lift. Every person I passed reminded me why I'd fought so hard. This wasn't just about me, it was about all of us. We had stood together, documented every injustice, exposed every lie, and faced the storm as one. Later, we voted to form a permanent homeowners council, built on transparency and mutual respect. No secret boards, no anonymous enforcers. Every decision would be recorded, every rule approved collectively. Our power would be shared, and the community would never again be held hostage by one person's ego. I walked past my workshop, now fully repaired, every tool in its place, security cameras humming softly. It had become a symbol, not just of resistance, but of resilience. It reminded me that standing your ground, documenting the truth, and acting with courage could turn fear into victory. By evening, the last of the news crews had left, satisfied with the story of a neighborhood's triumph. Karen had disappeared from public view, her threats empty, her power gone. I knew she might try again someday. People like her rarely quit quietly. But whatever she attempted next, she would face a community ready for her. As I stepped onto my porch, I looked out at the streets, alive, vibrant, free. Neighbors were setting up chairs for an impromptu evening chat. Kids were playing tag on freshly mown lawns. A gentle breeze rustled the trees, carrying the scent of flowers and home. And in that moment, I finally allowed myself to breathe. I had been tested, threatened, and cornered. But I had endured. I had fought, and I had won. Karen had tried to crush me. She had tried to silence an entire neighborhood. But we had survived. We had reclaimed our streets, our homes, and our lives. And in the quiet glow of that evening, I knew one undeniable truth. The nightmare was over, and the new beginning had just begun.